I can just picture that. Sup?
Today, I'm going to share 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I will share the photo that is famously associated with that story. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please offer to give the like button acupuncture, but then after you put in all the needles in their back and you stick the moxa to the end of the needles and you light those, just leave. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Ha! 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 Dice roll. Dice roll. Sheesh! 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 A crush on a groom.
Just after 6 p.m. on December 27th, 2015, a woman named Sarah Robinson was getting ready inside of her cabin on the 7th floor of a massive cruise ship. She and her
The 7th floor? God damn!
boyfriend were going to dinner that night with Sarah's parents in one of the restaurants on board the ship. And in fact, this entire trip, this whole vacation, was actually a big gift from Sarah's parents to Sarah and her boyfriend. And so far, the trip had been totally amazing. I mean, all 4 of them, Sarah, her boyfriend, and Sarah's parents, had got to go swimming and drink great drinks and have great food, and it was just like a total dream. But now they only had 1 night left, tonight, and they wanted to make the most of it. And their plan was to go to the big buffet that the ship offered and just totally indulge on the amazing food and just have some laughs, share stories, and then the next day they'd wake up in the Florida port that they left from, and the trip would be over. But for now, they had this 1 dinner left. And so after Sarah and her boyfriend were all ready, they left their cabin and they met Sarah's parents out in the hallway, and then Sarah led the way towards the stairwell that would bring them up to the 10th floor where the restaurant was that they were going to. Once they...
I know cruise ships are big, but it's just like, I've never been on a cruise before, so I can't really put it into perspective. But 10 floors? It's probably more floors than that. That's insane.
The 10th floor, Sarah could see right in front of her the entrance to this restaurant. And so she, her boyfriend, and her parents, all behind her, began walking towards the restaurant. And to get there, they would have to walk past this sort of lobby right in front of the restaurant, where there was this elevator bank that would go down to the lobby and all the other floors. And so, Sarah and her family, they walked past these elevators, and as they did, Sarah began to hear what sounded like rain hitting the outside of the ship. But that didn't make any sense because that whole day the weather had been beautiful and clear, and Sarah, when she heard this sound, she instinctively kind of looked around the corner out one of the windows and she looked out into the night and it was still clear and beautiful out. So this could not be rain. And so Sarah, she turned around and she looked at her boyfriend and her parents with a sort of quizzical look, being like, "Do you hear this? Like, what is that sound?" And they clearly had heard it too and were looking back at her like, "I don't know." But before they could even start to discuss whatever this was, a woman who they didn't know, who was standing near these elevators as well, began to scream. It would turn out just a few minutes before this woman began to scream, the cruise ship's chief electrician, 66-year-old Jose Sandoval Opazo, had begun doing routine maintenance on the elevators that were located a few floors below the 10th floor, but still within that same elevator bank that could bring you up to the 10th floor where that restaurant was. And while Jose was performing this very routine and quick maintenance on the elevator, something strange happened. But to understand why this happened, you need to understand a little bit about Jose and the other electricians on board this cruise ship. So there was oftentimes a lot of very quick and easy maintenance that would need to get done on these elevators, which would involve going into the elevator shaft to do it. But again, these are very short bursts, in and out, very easy to do. All the electricians know how to do it. And the procedure was to actually fully shut down that elevator, like completely, and then go inside and do the maintenance, and then go through the process of starting the elevator all over again. But that was so disruptive to the flow of traffic on the ship each day, and it was just kind of a hassle. And so Jose and the other electricians had come up with this sort of workaround that didn't require them to shut down the elevator. Because again, that was just a huge pain and they didn't want to do it. And so what they would do is they would wait until the elevator car within the shaft they needed to do maintenance on was at some other level, like on floor 2, and they would go into the elevator on like floor 8 and then quickly do the maintenance on the inside of the shaft or whatever it is they had to do. Or sometimes they would actually have to do repairs on the elevator car itself, in which case they would just kind of go in real quick, do the repairs, get out again. But all of it was predicated on just kind of knowing where the elevator car was in the...
What? So, are they in that space? I spit. Are they in that? I see it. Haha. Sorry. Are they in that space where it's like inside the elevator? Like, okay, you got the elevator, but it's like, I can't really describe it. Hopefully, I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but it's like you're not inside the elevator, but you're like inside the space where the elevator is, like on the outside. I don't even have something to. I can't even just, like, let's say this right here is the elevator, right? This whole thing is the elevator. And let's say the sand in here is where people get in, but the glass is where it's that. I'm getting frustrated because I can't explain it. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Because I cannot explain this shit. Hopefully this marker works. Okay. That's some big ass scratches. Okay, and let's say this is work. Okay, it works. Let's say this is the elevator, right? That's the elevator. Well, that's the outside, okay. This whole thing is the shits. This whole thing is the elevator. And then this is where people get in, right? This is the actual shits where people get in and they go from level to level. Are the electricians, are they inside this area, this part, like right here? Are they all like right here? Yeah, all right. Hopefully I know what I'm talking about. Because I can't get no more simple. I can't break it down like no more than that. Okay, let's go.
Shaft and being really quick, in and out. And so Jose and the other electricians had done this many times and there was no issues. But on this day, Jose, he got into the elevator shaft.
Okay, that's what I meant. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. He's inside the shits. Okay, he's actually on top of the elevator. Okay, got it.
Simple repairs. And so he actually was standing inside of the shaft on top of the elevator car that was down, a few levels down from 10. And he began making these repairs. And suddenly the car lurched into action because a guest unknowingly had walked into the elevator car and pressed floor 10. And so Jose is on this elevator car that starts moving, and before he can even figure out what's going on, the little opening that he used, the kind of service entrance into the shaft, had been covered up by the elevator car. And so his exit was now gone, and he was now relatively slowly moving up the shaft. Now, Jose would have no idea when this car was going to stop, but if it went to the top, he'd get crushed, and he knew it. And so in kind of a moment of panic, Jose attempted to step to the side.
Oh, God, he got crushed. Oh, was that what the title of this was? Crushed. And so her hearing that splashing or whatever that thing is that blood? Is that him? That
to like somehow go between the wall and the elevator. It was like he had nowhere to go and he knew it and he just took that path. But there was like an inch of space between the wall and the car. And so the second he did that, the car kept going and it sucked him down into that space and just destroyed him. And so by the time this elevator car reached its destination, the 10th floor, and that guest got off the elevator car, by this point, Jose's body had been totally destroyed.
Damn!
And all of his blood was dripping down the elevator shaft, splattering into the walls and hitting the ground, and it sounded like rain hitting the outside of the ship. And so that's what Sarah and her family were hearing. And then the reason that woman started screaming is she was the first one who turned and saw all this blood coming down the front of the elevator.
Oh my God!
Medics would arrive quickly on the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Jose was deceased.
Oh! Oh my God. Head count sounds so disturbing.
At around 2 p.m. on September 24th, 2017, a 17-year-old college student named Sanjay climbed up onto this boulder that was right off to the side of this hiking trail that he was on. Sanjay was on a day trip with about 20 of his friends from college, and they were in this part of southern India that was really famous for its long, winding trails and all these boulders that kind of sat off to the side of the trails. And then at the end of these trails that are in this part of India is this beautiful ancient Hindu temple that a lot of people will go and take pictures in front of and go inside of. And so that was where Sanjay and his friends were ultimately headed, was this temple. And from the boulder that Sanjay had just climbed up on, he looked up the trail, and from his view now, which was now slightly higher, he could actually see just barely the top of this temple. And so he was really excited about going to see it, and he couldn't believe how close they were. But as he was standing on this boulder, staring at the top of the temple, he also realized that kind of off to the side of the temple, basically right next to it, was this beautiful pool of water with a big wall around it and cement steps leading.
That water looked green as shit. What you talking about?
Into it. I mean, it kind of looked like a swimming pool. And so because Sanjay and his friends had been hiking all day to this point, and it was really hot out, Sanjay really liked the idea of going swimming.
Nah.
And so he actually jumped off the boulder and just started running towards the temple and this pool. And he was yelling to his friends as he did, like, hey, I'm going to go swimming. And so he ran, not to the temple, but to this random pool of water that was next to it. And he got to the steps and he immediately took off his shirt and he pulled his phone out of his pocket and he put it on the steps. And
I don't think that's a pool. If it is, wouldn't more people know about it? That seems very isolated.
Walked his way into the water and turned around, hoping to see his friends coming after him. And sure enough, all of his friends were smiling and laughing and running after him, ripping their shirts off, putting their phones down, and jumping into. And so pretty soon, this very quiet, peaceful pool next to this temple was packed full of very rowdy and crazy college kids. Now, to be clear, this pool of water was not intended to be a swimming area.
I'm saying.
It was dug about 300 years earlier for this temple, and many people began to view this pool of water as sacred because they believed it could cure diseases. And so what Sanjay and his friends were doing was totally taboo and not allowed. But I can promise you, Sanjay and his friends did not care. They were having a great time. And in fact, Sanjay was having such a great time that when he turned around and looked back up the steps they'd all charged in on, he saw one of his friends, whose name was Vishwas, was standing up out of the water reading what looked like a plaque about this pool of water. And Sanjay hated the idea of one of their buddies not getting to experience this fun. And so Sanjay, a little out of pocket, yelled out to Vishwas, like, hey, stop reading that and get in the water. Let's go. What are you doing? And Vishwas was obviously kind of embarrassed to be called out so publicly in front of the, 19 other kids that were there. They're all looking up at him expectantly now, like, yeah, get in here, man. And Vishwas, he's like, okay, fine. And so he took off his shirt, put his phone down as well, and he got in the water with all of them. And very shortly after he did that, Sanjay kind of forgot about him and decided, hey, this would be a great time to take a photo of everybody here, memorialize this amazing trip. And so Sanjay, he waded over to the steps, he grabbed his phone, he came back towards the group, and he's looking at this big rowdy crowd of his friends who are totally not paying attention to him. And he's saying, hey guys, come over here. I want to take your photo, gather up, I'll take a photo of all of us. And so it took a couple of minutes, but eventually, all these kids got in frame, and Sanjay, he held the phone out, made sure everybody was there, and they all smiled, and he took a picture. And then after he took the picture, Sanjay put his phone back on the steps and returned to just splashing and goofing around with his friends. About an hour later, Sanjay and his friends had left the pool and were now in the temple and were just walking around exploring. But eventually, Sanjay just got tired of looking inside the temple. It was not very interesting to him. And so he eventually just went outside again and sat down on this low wall that was right outside the temple. And because he knew his friends would not be done for at least, 15 or 20 minutes or so, he just pulled out his phone and began kind of scrolling through social media and, doing what we all do on our phones. But eventually, Sanjay opened up his photo album to look at all the photos he had taken during the hike in, and then also that picture in the pool, and then also some pictures he took inside of the temple. And so he pulls up his pictures and just kind of starts scrolling through them, and he eventually reaches the photo that he took, selfie style, in the pool with all of his friends together. And so he opens that picture up and he looks at it and he smiles because it definitely was the best picture he took. He got all his buddies in frame. Everybody seemed so happy. But as Sanjay was looking at this photo, he realized there was something odd about it. There was just something in this photo that just seemed like it shouldn't be. And as he looked more closely at it, the smile on his face faded, and he began to panic just a little bit. He didn't know if what he was looking at was real or not, but he knew he had to go find out. And so Sanjay put his phone away, and he looked up and began looking around outside the temple at all the other people who had left, and many of them included his friends. And they were walking around, talking in groups or whatever. And Sanjay, he began looking at all of his friends, and he would stare at their faces. He was looking for something, but he didn't see what he was looking for.
Can you imagine? Looking at the phone. Go to his friends.
So after scanning the entire outside and not feeling satisfied, Sanjay got up and speed walked back into the temple and began going into each and every room, looking at every single person he encountered. And when he would find one of his friends, he would stare at their face. And when he didn't find what he was looking for, he just kept on going to every single room until finally he reached the last room of the temple and he found the last of his friends and he looked at their faces and still he did not see what he was looking for. And so now Sanjay is truly panicked. He's actually horrified at this point. He runs back outside and he finds their college professor who had come along to sort of chaperone the trip. And he ran up to this professor and he pulled out his phone. He opened up that photo of them in the pool and he showed the professor what he had found. And Sanjay pointed out the strange thing about this photo. And so the professor, he began looking at the photo too, and right away he also could see this very strange thing that seemed very out of place. And so the professor asked Sanjay a few follow-up questions, about like what Sanjay had done since discovering this. And after Sanjay said, I've been all over the temple, I still can't figure it out. And so the professor knew the police would have to get involved. And so the professor got in touch with police, and so the police came out to the temple not long after that. And the students, so Sanjay and all of his friends, had been instructed to stay right by the temple. Do not go down to the pool, stay up here, let the police handle it. And so when the police came in, they came running by the group, and Sanjay and his friends were just kind of watching anxiously, waiting to see what happens. And then as the officers went down to the pool, from where Sanjay and his friends were standing, they actually did not have a clear view. The temple itself blocked their view, so they could not see the pool, but they could hear what the officers were doing. And at first, as Sanjay and his friends are standing there really nervously, they don't hear anything down at the pool. But then they hear one of the officers shout something out, like he's found something. And then Sanjay and his friends heard all this splashing as clearly officers were jumping into the pool. And it was at this moment when Sanjay heard that splashing that he knew the thing he saw in this photo, it had to be real. As horrible as that was, it had to be real. The reason why Sanjay's friend Vishwas was not in the water with everybody else, why he was up reading that plaque about the history of this pool, was because Vishwas did not know how to swim, but he didn't tell anyone. Nobody knew this. And so he was probably kind of embarrassed about it. And so maybe he was reading this plaque as sort of a way to, act distracted, like the plaque is the reason he's not swimming. But then when Sanjay, who meant no harm by this, but he yelled out to Vishwas, "Hey, come on, dude, get in here, come swimming with us." Because he did it so publicly in front of all the other friends, it seems like Vishwas felt very pressured into getting into the water. And that's what he did. Instead of telling anybody that he could not swim, he just kind of shrugged, took off his shirt, pulled his phone out of his pocket, put it on the ground, and waded into the water. And as soon as he did, the entire group just kind of went back to goofing around and splashing and being totally chaotic. And then when Sanjay was like, hey, let's take that photo, he really did manage to get all of his friends in frame somehow, except one of them was Vishwas, and you can only see the top of his head. It's because he was drowning in the background of that photo, just nobody knew it. And so...
Shit. Damn. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. God damn. I would have been like, if I was him, I would have been like, hey, I want to take the picture. I want to take the picture. Best believe I want to take this group picture. But can we take it by the side of the pool so I could just like hang on it a little bit? That's what you should have did.
Obviously, an hour later, when Sanjay's looking at this photo, he sees the top of Vishwas's head, and he's like, wait a minute, is he goofing around or is he drowning? And then he ran all around the temple looking for Vishwas. He wanted to prove that he was not in the pool still, that he was up here. But then after searching the entire area and not finding Vishwas, he went to his professor, they called the police, and the discovery was made. And unfortunately, by the time police pulled Vishwas out of the water, he was already deceased.
Damn, Jesus Christ.
Late on the morning of June 27th, 1957, a 25-year-old Austrian mountain climber named Kurt Diemberger plunged his ice axe into the deep snow ahead of him and then used the axe to pull himself up and over a big ice clump. Kurt was totally physically and mentally exhausted by this point and only wanted to stop for like 2 seconds just to catch his breath. But he knew that was just not an option. Kurt and his climbing partner, a 32-year-old man named Herman Buell, were climbing one of the tallest mountains in the world called...
He kind of looks like Tom Hardy a little bit. I'm not going to hold you.
Lisa, which is located in northern Pakistan. And they were doing this climb all alone. It was just those two, and they had virtually no safety equipment. Now, for reference, this was not normal. Anybody who climbed Chogalisa did so with Sherpas and guides and oxygen masks. I mean, this was a dangerous climb, and so serious measures had to be taken to ensure it was safe. But Kurt and Herman felt like, that takes all the fun out of mountain climbing. There has to be, like real risk here for this to be worth doing. And also, critically, Kurt and Herman were well aware of the fact that if they successfully climbed Chogalisa with no safety equipment, so what they were planning to do, that would be a new world record because nobody had ever done that before on this mountain.
Yeah, that's because they probably died doing it.
So that felt like a really cool reason to go for this. And when they began their journey a few days earlier, when they began the climb, it had still felt like a great idea because the weather forecast was perfect for the rest of the time they expected to be on the mountain. However, earlier that morning, Kurt had turned around to talk to Herman, and he noticed off to the south was a kind of ominous dark cloud making its way toward them. Now, obviously, when you're on the ground and you look up and you see a dark cloud, you think, okay, it might storm, or it's actively storming. Maybe it's rain, maybe it's snow, but it's probably not a big deal unless it's like a tsunami or a hurricane or something, but dark clouds are just not really a big deal. But when you are 4 miles up one of the most treacherous mountains in the world, you got no other people with you, you got no safety equipment, and you see a dark cloud coming your way, that's terrifying. Because storms have been killing mountain climbers basically for as long as mountain climbing has been a thing. And so when Kurt and Herman saw this cloud, even though the weather forecast had been good, they knew that there was a real chance a storm was going to hit them before they reached the summit. And so they had to make a choice. Abort the mission now, go back to camp, and potentially give up on this climb altogether, thereby not getting the world record.
Yeah.
Or they could risk it and just try to speed...
Come back and do it a different day. Come back at a different time. Come back at a different time. Don't. I feel like you're going to do it, but don't. Come back another day.
Their way up to the summit before the storm arrived. And because Kurt and Herman were actually within about 1,000 feet to the summit when Kurt noticed this dark cloud, they decided, you know what, let's just risk it. We can get up there to the summit, get this thing done before this cloud ever gets to us. And so that was the decision they made. And it was also why Kurt and Herman knew there was no way they could slow down even for a second, because basically this was a sprint to the top. And if they slowed down, they might die. And so, panting and exhausted with the wind whipping up like mad, Kurt and Herman just kept moving up that mountain as fast as they possibly could. But when they got about maybe 500 feet away from the summit, so they're really close at this point, something changed. As Kurt was about to bring his axe back down into the snow to, pull himself up one more step, he suddenly realized he couldn't see the mountain in front of him.
What?
Like there was nothing. It was just pure white.
Damn.
All around him. He couldn't even see the sky. It was like he was just in this void all of a sudden.
He did.
And the reason for this is because that dark cloud had caught up to them.
Oh.
They were literally inside of the cloud.
Oh,
That's
shit.
why they couldn't see anything.
Damn! It's like that. Oh my God. I thought he was dead.
Behind Kurt, even though he can't see anything, he could hear Herman desperately screaming up to him, "Hey, we've got to turn around right now!" And Kurt obviously knew, yeah, it's too late. We are not going to make the summit. We got to go. Kurt knew Herman was right. I mean, this is an absolute crisis. If the storm that's basically brewing all around them didn't kill them, certainly the result of the storm would. I mean, all the snow that's going to land is going to fill in their tracks, and it would be nearly impossible to find your way back down again. And so this was like, we totally miscalculated. Turn around and get out of here as fast as possible. And so that's what Kurt and Herman began to do. As fast as they could, they began going down the mountain, following along their tracks they had left on the way up. And pretty quickly, Kurt and Herman began making serious progress. And so Kurt was starting to feel optimistic that, maybe they had managed to escape this just in time. But right at that moment, the ground underneath Kurt began to vibrate.
Damn.
Then Kurt looked down, and even though his visibility was basically nothing, he could tell from his legs that the ground was basically shifting underneath him. And then suddenly Kurt felt this feeling that you get when you're on like a carnival ride and you're dropped, that feeling in your stomach that you're falling. He got that because the ground underneath him just gave way. It was an avalanche. And so in absolute desperation, Kurt, who knows he's about to be sucked into an avalanche, he just jumped like as far away.
Oh shit! I want to see this as a movie now. I can just picture that. Oh my God.
On the mountain as he possibly could, kind of at an angle to the right, like he was leaping up and out of the avalanche and over to the right. But you got to remember, he's on this really steep slope. This is not like jumping on flat ground where you jump up and just return to where you jumped from. He's on a slope. So when he jumped out and to the right, it was like he was jumping off a building. He fell something like 30 or so feet before he hit the ground again. But when Kurt hit the ground, he kind of expected to be gobbled up by the snow and keep being sucked down the mountain, but he wasn't. He hit the ground and didn't move. And then he kind of sat up and he looked around and he realized he had successfully jumped out of the avalanche. He had done it. He saved himself. And so he began looking around. The visibility is still terrible, but it's a little bit better because now the avalanche has basically gone down the mountain. The storm is kind of passing, and so the visibility is decent. And, Kurt, he's looking around, screaming out for Herman. He doesn't see him. And then it's like suddenly the visibility just opened up. And Kurt was able to look to his left where the avalanche had gone. And as he was looking, he saw what looked impossible. Basically, the land where they had been walking down this mountain was gone. It was like the avalanche had removed that part of the mountain. And so Kurt is basically laying in the snow on the edge of a new cliff where the avalanche had basically broken.
So is he fine? No broken bones, no damages, no bruises, no sprains. He's just fine. Really? Or unless he's just hyped off of adrenaline, and he probably gonna feel some shit later on. But he seems fine to me. What the hell? Where's his friend at?
The mountain. And so he's looking into this crevasse where the avalanche went, and thinking, I can't believe how lucky I am, but I gotta go find Herman. And so Kurt stands up, and he's pretty battered from this 30-foot fall, but he's got adrenaline pumping through him, so he feels pretty good. And he scrambles his way 30 feet back up the mountain to this ridgeline where he originally jumped out of the avalanche, hoping when he got up there that he might find some sign of where Herman went to, because they were pretty close together when the avalanche started. But when he got up there was no sign of Herman, and he turned around and looked back down the mountain, and he couldn't see Herman anywhere. But when he turned back around, looking now back up the mountain, so in the direction of where they had originally intended to hike, and then where they had to come back down from when they were in the cloud, he noticed that he could see very easily their tracks, he and Herman's tracks. And so with his eyes, he just kind of tracked these tracks all the way down the mountain to where he was. And as he did this, he noticed something. At first, it was like his brain couldn't compute what he was seeing. But after a moment, he knew. Here is a photo of what Kurt would have seen. However, keep in mind, this was not a photo Kurt took, and it's also from a slightly farther away perspective. But conceptually, this really is what Kurt saw that told him what happened to Herman. So in this photo, you can see the mountain and the summit's at the top, and there's a trail that goes straight down and then appears to diverge, where there's tracks that go to the left. From our perspective, the viewer's perspective, they go to the left around that cliff line, and the other set of footprints that disappear off the cliff. Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, the footprints that go to the left are Kurt's footprints. He just magically jumped and landed on the absolute edge of where this avalanche was going to happen, and Herman is the other set of prints.
God!
And so when that avalanche started, there was nowhere for Herman to go, and he was sucked into that avalanche and dragged over 1,000 feet down the mountain, and his body was never recovered.
That one person, that one guy that made it through the avalanche, Adidas was on his side. The other person, not so much. Just saying. That whole story with the mountain and the storm, that could easily be a movie. I want to see that. That look like it would be good to watch. With the first one with the cruise, I'm sure they got stairs. So for next time y'all want to do some shit like that and like kind of risk fixing like the electrical work in the elevator, just shut it down and tell everybody to use the steps. Cause it's like, that's crazy. That's crazy as hell. Damn. I can't believe that they really went through that shit. That's insane. And then for the one in India, again, I would have been like, you know what? For obvious reasons, can we take a picture? Oh, he didn't even show it at first. Can we take a picture on the edge of the pool? So I'm gonna go ahead and just be like this. Yeah. Keep it cool, keep it classy, and I love you, stay happy. My friend. Or, I just realized he could have just, like, low-key been on, like, he could have been on top of somebody else, or, like, hanging on somebody else, or some friend type of stuff, instead of just being just distant. Like, he could have just been low-key hanging on somebody else's shoulders or something. I don't know. Keep it cool, keep it classy, and I love you. Stay happy, my family.